The doctor opened my file, looked at it for a moment, looked at me, and then went quiet for longer than doctors usually do. I have been in a lot of rooms in my life. Film sets, courtrooms, church basements, hospital corridors. I have learned to read the quality of a silence the way other men read weather. This particular silence was the kind that means what comes next is going to require you to rethink something you have been treating as settled. He told me what he saw in plain language. He said it was the worst he had encountered in its specific category. Not dramatic, just factual. The way a man tells you the foundation of a house is gone, not to frighten you, just because it is true and you need to know. I had been functioning. That was the word my brain kept producing on the way home. Functioning. I had been making films, raising children, getting through days. What I had not been told, and could not have seen from the inside, was that I had been playing a broken instrument for years and getting so good at compensating for the damage that I had stopped noticing the instrument was broken at all. What I am about to tell you is this. If you have ever tried to rebuild your life after losing something real and it did not hold, or it held for a while and then the same thing gave way again, it was not because you were weak or because you did not try hard enough. It was because nobody told you what the rebuild actually requires. Not the visible part, the part underneath the visible part. By the end of this, you will know exactly what that is, and you will stop losing years to the wrong version of the work. Run this back on the day the pull gets loud. What I am about to tell you took me a long time to learn, and none of it is comfortable, and every word of it is true. The first thing, and the one most men refuse to look at because it means giving up the story of the collapse as something that happened to them. A real collapse is not an accident. I know how that lands. Some of what falls on a man is genuinely not his fault. I am not talking about fault. I am talking about something more specific and more uncomfortable than fault. A building does not collapse in one afternoon. It develops problems in its structure over months, over years, sometimes over decades. A crack here, something soft in the foundation. A wall that was never actually load-bearing, only painted to look like it was. The man who stands in the rubble and says this came from nowhere, he is telling the truth as he experienced it. But the truth of the structure is different. Marcus Aurelius wrote something in the 2nd century that I did not encounter until I was well into my 40s. He said, the things which hurt instruct. Not that pain is educational in some tidy sense, that it is specific, it is pointing at something. It is trying to tell you something very particular about the structure of the thing that just failed, if you are willing to hear it in the moment rather than running immediately to the next distraction. The problem is that most men cannot hear it, because most men, when something real collapses, do the same thing. They move fast, they make a plan, they show recovery. They are back in motion within weeks, telling a version of the story that already has a resolution attached to it. And 2 years later, 3 years later, the same pressure finds the same spot and the same thing gives way. Not because they are weak, because they were moving too quickly to hear what the collapse was saying. Here's the thing nobody says directly. The men who rebuild fastest are usually the ones who learn the least. Does that sound familiar? The fast recovery that looked right from the outside and felt hollow from the inside. I have watched this happen enough times to say it with certainty. A man loses everything, career, relationship, reputation, some combination, and within months he has a new version of all of it that looks from the outside like recovery. And then the pressure arrives again, it always finds the same spot, because the spot was never actually repaired, the rubble was cleared, the building went up, the crack is still there, same depth, same location, waiting. The second man takes longer. He is slower and quieter, and people around him get uncomfortable with how quiet he is. He says very little about what comes next. He asks questions instead of producing answers. He goes down before he goes up, and what he builds on the other side does not break at the same pressure point because he repaired the foundation before he started building on it. The first man is faster, the second man ends up somewhere the first man cannot reach. I've been both of them. I know the difference from the inside. Put this on every morning until something shifts in how you hear it. The second thing is the one that stopped me cold when I finally understood it. There is a dead man inside you with very strong opinions about what you can do. The man who collapsed, not the man reading this, were listening to this, the earlier version, he did not survive the collapse. He is gone. But his reflexes are still here. His specific fears are still here. His precise sense of what you deserve, what is possible, what kind of person you actually are under everything. All of that is still running, making decisions, blocking doors, steering you away from certain rooms with a confidence that feels like your own instinct. It is not your instinct. It is his, and he is dead, and he is running things. John Ford said something to me years ago when I was young enough to think I understood it. He said most men spend their entire lives playing a character they built when they were young. The character works well enough that they keep playing it, they get very good at the character, and they never find out what is underneath it, because the character never breaks. The collapse breaks the character. That is the one thing it is guaranteed to do. And here is where men divide. Some of them build a new character immediately on top of the rubble, because standing without a character is terrifying. And some of them sit in the rubble for a while, uncomfortable and unglamorous, and start to find out what was actually underneath the character all along. The ghost, the dead man's version of you, shows up in specific places. Think about what that looks like in the ordinary run of a day. An opportunity arrives. Before your thinking mind has even fully processed it, there is a pull, a pressure, something that feels like your own voice saying, that is not for you, too big, too exposed, requires something you are not sure you have. That feeling is immediate and it is confident. And that is the ghost. That is the dead man telling you what the living man can do. Picture this. You are several months out from the worst of it. You are moving. You look recovered. People around you say you handled it well. And you have not yet asked whose voice is making these decisions, because if you have not asked it, you already know the answer. The ghost is steering. And the rebuild looks from the inside exactly like the old life, because the ghost only knows how to build the old life. The second man starts catching it, not in dramatic moments, in small ones. A conversation where he notices himself deflecting, a door he keeps not walking through, and finally asks why. A version of himself that he has been protecting, that when he looks at it honestly, he is not sure he actually wants to protect anymore. He is slower. He looks from the outside like he is struggling. He is not struggling. He is separating the ghost's voice from his voice, the old reflexes from actual choice. The practice is not complex. When that pull arrives, and it will arrive multiple times a day if you are paying attention, stop before you act on it. One breath, one question. Is this actually mine, or is this his? You will not always know. The question alone is enough. It creates a small gap between the ghost's voice and your response. In that gap, you have a choice you did not have before. That gap is what the whole rebuild is made of. When did you last catch yourself doing this? Not dramatically. Just a small thing, a door you walk past, a version of yourself you quietly protected without asking why. That is where the work actually lives. The third thing comes from my father, and it is the one I resisted longest because it looked from the outside like weakness. Hutton Gibson came back from Guadalcanal and he did not talk about it. Not once, as far as I know. Not to my mother, not to his children, not to anyone I was aware of. He brought something back from those islands and he put it in a room inside himself and he locked the door and he threw away the key. And I thought as a boy that that was the strongest thing about him. The absolute containment, the refusal to let what was in the room out into the rest of his life. I understand it differently now. The men who came back from the worst of what that war produced and built real lives afterward, raised children who were not afraid of them, grew into something other than the damage. They were not the ones who locked the room completely. They were the ones who found a way to let some of what was in the room breathe, just a little, without letting it run everything. The ones who sealed it completely were still at Guadalcanal decades later, still making decisions in 1965 or 1975 from a room that was frozen in 1943. A collapse is not a war, but what you do with what it left inside you, whether you sit with it long enough to hear what it is saying, or whether you clear the debris immediately and start building so you do not have to feel the ground under your feet. That is the same question. The silence before the rebuild is not weakness. It is the most important work of the whole process. The men who move immediately rebuild the same structure on the same ground. The men who go quiet first, genuinely quiet, not performing stillness, but actually still, they hear something in that quiet that the motion never lets you hear. They arrive somewhere the fast movers cannot reach. This is not an instruction to do nothing. It is an instruction to sit in the rubble for long enough to actually see what is there. A week, a month, however long it takes to stop performing recovery and start actually looking at the structure. Have you given yourself that? Or have you been moving because moving felt like the only option? The fourth thing is the one that came to me in a brain scan machine, and it changed how I thought about everything that came before it. There was a musician I knew named Richard. He had been playing guitar since childhood. Not a famous name, the kind of musician who plays on records you have heard hundreds of times without knowing his name. Session work, mostly, 40 years of it. Somewhere along the way, he developed a nerve problem in his left hand. He did not stop playing. He adjusted his grip, changed his technique, and over time, he got so skilled at compensating for the damage that most people who heard him could not detect it. He could not detect it anymore himself. The compensation had become invisible to him. It was simply how he played. It was who he was as a musician. He went to a specialist eventually who told him two things. The nerve problem had been treatable for years, and the compensatory technique he had spent so long perfecting had now created a secondary problem in his wrist. He had been building on a broken instrument for so long that the building had become part of the damage. When the specialist showed me my own scans, I thought about Richard. He sat down across from me, took longer to start talking than doctors usually do, which I have already told you I know how to read, and he described what he saw. He said it was the worst he had encountered in his particular field, not the worst he had heard of, the worst he had personally seen. He said it the way a man describes a thing that is simply true and that he thinks you need to know. I had been functioning, that was what I kept thinking, getting through days, making things. I had not known, because you cannot know it from the inside, that I had been compensating for physical damage in my brain for years, adjusting and rerouting and working around it until the compensation felt like ordinary thinking. It was not ordinary thinking. It was the working around version. And the working around version was limiting things I could not even see were being limited. 40 sessions in a hyperbaric chamber, fish oil, vitamin B, complex, same time, every day, without exception. Things the specialist recommended, things I found through conversations with other people who had been through comparable situations and come out genuinely different. I am not going to tell you it fixed everything, because fixed is not the right word, and it would not be honest. What I will tell you is that within months I was in a different relationship with my own thinking, cleaner, more honest about what was actually there and what was compensation. Before you rebuild anything on the outside, the work, the relationships, the reputation, the sense of yourself in the world, repair the instrument you are building with. Not perfectly, not all the way, enough to see clearly. You cannot see clearly while you are still bleeding. You cannot diagnose an engine while it is on fire. What are you currently building with? Is the instrument actually in shape for it, or are you compensating again and calling it functioning? This is the exercise I want you to do today, not tomorrow. Take a piece of paper. Write down the one thing in your life that you have been working around, not the most urgent thing. The thing you have been compensating for so long, you have almost stopped seeing it as damage and started seeing it as just how you are. Under that, write the one reason you have not looked directly at it. Not a general reason, the specific one. Then write one action, not a plan, one single action that moves toward it today. Keep the paper. What it says tomorrow will be different from what it says right now. The fifth thing is the one nobody names on channels like this one. Nobody says this out loud because it sounds like it cannot be true, and it is. After the collapse, you will grieve the version of yourself that failed. Not the best version of you, not who you were on your strongest day, the damaged version, the one running on the drinking or the anger or the ego or whatever the specific mechanism was in your case. The version that was, in ways you understood even at the time, destroying things. You will miss him. He will feel in a way that will surprise you and that you will not be able to explain to anyone who has not been through this, like home. I knew a man named Thomas. He had been sober for years when I met him, had done the real work, built a real life, the kind you can see the effort in. And he still talked about the drinking years with something in his voice that I can only describe as tenderness, not nostalgia for the destruction, something more honest. We were standing in the parking lot of a church hall after a meeting one evening, and he said to me, "I know exactly what I was. I know every specific thing it cost and every one it cost it too." But that man could walk into a room and be easy in a way I am still learning. He did not have to think about how to be with people. He just was. What Thomas was mourning was not the alcohol. He was mourning a self that had been built on something destructive, but that had its own particular coherence, its own ease, its own specific aliveness. The destructive thing was the scaffolding holding that version of him upright. When the scaffolding came down, the ease came down with it. He had to learn to be in a room all over again, from scratch, without the thing that had been doing that work. That grief is real. It is not a sign that you made the wrong decision. It is not a signal to go back. It is evidence that something that actually existed is now gone. Real things, when they die, get mourned. That is not a malfunction. That is how grief is supposed to work. The error is performing its absence. You can be fine and clear and grateful and also be grieving something real at the same time. Those do not cancel each other out. The man who tries to perform his way past the grief without feeling it, his rebuild has a hole in it that he cannot find or name for years. You probably know what I mean. That low background current that something is missing even when everything looks right. If you skip the grief, it does not disappear. It goes underground. It surfaces later in a form that is harder to put down a pull toward the old situation you keep treating as weakness when it is actually just unfinished mourning. Grieve it. Give it its proper time. It will not last as long as you think, and then it will be done, actually done, in a way that skipping it never allows. The sixth thing is where this entire conversation has been heading, and it is the most important thing I am going to say. You are not going back. I do not mean you are not going back to the specific situation. I mean something more fundamental. The version of you that existed before the collapse, the man who built what fell, who operated the way he operated, who wanted what he wanted and feared what he feared, that man is not the rebuild target. And yet, almost every man I have ever watched try to rebuild after a real collapse uses him as the target anyway. Back to who I was, back to what I had, back to the feeling of being that person in the world. That is the wrong direction. Not because the past was worthless, because the man standing in the rubble right now has something the man before the collapse never had. He has specific knowledge of what breaks and what holds. He knows in his body and not just his head what was real and what was performance. He knows which walls were load-bearing and which ones were just painted to look like they were. The man before the collapse did not have that knowledge. He built without it. You are not him. You have more information than he ever did. I drove up the Pacific Coast Highway alone after the worst of what I have described had settled. I was past the acute part of it. I had done some of the real work, the silence, the beginning of the instrument repair. I was looking at what came next, and I kept running into the same wall. I kept trying to figure out what the rebuild looked like, and everything I pictured looked like a version of what had already fallen. The same kind of work, the same position, the same measures of whether I was back or not back. I stopped the car at a point where you can see a long way down the coast. I sat there for a while, and it came to me, not as a thought exactly, more as a recognition. I was trying to rebuild something that the collapse had already made obsolete. The old target was gone. Not taken gone. The collapse had not just removed what I had. It had removed the relevance of what I had been aiming at. And what I had not yet done was ask, honestly, and without the ghost steering, what is worth building now with everything I know that I did not know before? That is a different question than what do I want to get back? It is a harder question, and it is the right one. After every studio in the industry said no to the Passion of the Christ, I put up my own money. Not because I had nothing to lose, because by that point I had already lost enough to stop being afraid of losing more. And that specific state, the state of not optimizing for the outcome, produces a quality of decision that the careful, protected version of a man cannot access. The film reached more people than anyone predicted, because it was made from a place that safety does not produce. There was nothing left to protect, so the work could be exactly what it needed to be. I am not recommending that you lose everything as a strategy. I am telling you that the ground you are standing on right now, as uncomfortable as it is, as exposed as it feels, has a quality that the ground before it never had. It has been stripped of the things that were false. What is left is what is actually yours. And you can build something on what is actually yours that you could never have built on the mixture of real and performance that was there before. The old life did not have clearance for where you are going. It could not have gotten there. The collapse was the clearance. What is the thing you could not have built before this happened? Not the thing you want back, the thing that is only possible now. Come back to this on the day it feels too large. That is exactly when this matters most. The seventh thing, the last one, the most practical and, in my experience, the hardest to hear. The rebuild does not begin when you feel ready. Waiting to feel ready is the most sophisticated form of avoiding the thing that needs to happen. It presents itself as self-knowledge, as wisdom, as taking the process seriously. I am not ready yet. I need more time. I need to understand what happened more fully before I start. All of those things can be true, genuinely, actually true, and also be a very polished and very convincing way of not starting. There was a man I knew named James. He had been sober for several months when I crossed paths with him, and he was at a specific stage I recognized past the acute crisis, not yet into the real rebuild. He talked constantly and in detail about what he was going to do when he felt ready. He had a picture of it, the work he wanted to do, the kind of man he intended to become, how he was going to move through the world once he was solid enough to start. He could describe it clearly and with real feeling. He thought about it continuously. He was not doing any of it. I asked him, not harshly, what he was actually waiting for. He told me he wanted to feel stable before he started. I said, describe stable. He described it a specific feeling of groundedness, of not being reactive, of knowing he could handle what came. I said, would the man you just described hesitate before starting the thing you want to start? He stopped. He said, probably not. I said, so the stable version of you would not need stability to begin. He was quiet for a moment and then said something I have not forgotten. He said, I think I have been waiting to become someone who does not need to wait. That is the trap. Exactly. You are waiting to become the version of yourself who will not need the courage to start. But that version is not coming first. He is produced by the starting. He does not arrive and then make the beginning possible. The beginning makes him. I know this from inside. I have been the man waiting to feel solid. I have been in the parking lot with the engine off, thinking I would know when I was ready. I was never ready before I started. Not once. Every single thing I am glad I did, I started before I felt ready to start it. That is not bravado. That is just what the record actually shows. Marcus Aurelius wrote, and I came back to this many times in the years I have been describing, that you could leave life right now and let that fact determine what you do and say and think. Not as a threat, as a clarifier. If this were the specific window, what would you stop calling not yet? The action I am asking you to do is this. Name one thing, one specific thing you have been calling not yet, not the whole rebuild. One action inside it. Something you could do today, not perfectly, not with everything in place, but one movement in the direction. Write it on the same piece of paper with the instrument and the compensation. Write it at the bottom. One thing today. Most people who hear this will feel something in the chest when they hear it, something that moves, and then they will put this down and go back to what they were doing before. They will mean to come back to it. The feeling will fade, the not yet will return. I know that. It has always been true of conversations like this one, and I am not saying it to shame anyone. I am saying it because the 5% who do not put it down deserve to know they are not alone, and that what they are about to do is the right move. Play this again when the not yet gets loud. The second time through it sounds different. Here is where it all lands. There is a dead man inside you with strong opinions about what is possible. The collapse broke the character, not the man. The silence before the rebuild is not emptiness, it is the most important work. The instrument needs repair before it can play clearly. The grief is real, and it is allowed to be real. The clearance for where you are going was issued the day the old thing fell. And it does not begin when you are ready. It begins the moment you decide that one more day of the not yet costs more than starting now. Go write the thing at the bottom of the paper. Subscribe and come back for the next one.